please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's log, subdates 230413.5. We made the crucifix out of vibranium so that the crew can have additional fun when pelting Bork with fangs. Oh, and before I forget, we now have 100 clones made. That's right, everyone. 100 NPC whammon, 'cause science. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the exhibition of stupid people. Today we are going to start with the BBC. And yes, obligatory. Hashtag defund the BBC. I will always stand by that for as long as they exist. The rather novel idea of having a TV license, all of which goes to the BBC when their numbers are going down because they produce very little original content and most of it is absolute shite, is beyond anyone's comprehension at this point. It may be considered an institution, but I've often found other platforms are vastly superior, and I shouldn't have to pay a license when the other platforms I use don't receive any of that money. Maybe they should just run ads instead, like everyone else. Or a subscription service, see how long they last. When I was scrolling through the news app thing on my phone, I noticed this here. Twitter, BBC objects to government-funded media label. An article published by the BBC. Interesting. I can see some free news content there for them to go through. Basically what has happened is, on its Twitter account, its main one at that, it is described as government-funded media. That's the label for it. Because it is that. The TV license is a government scheme. They receive their funding from that. Therefore, they are government-funded media. They're going to try and argue otherwise, citing the fact that it's a conservative government in power. And that would imply that they are therefore in the pocket of the conservative government. That's semantics. We're above that here. I've often thought of the BBC as biased beyond reckoning. It doesn't matter which government's in office. They are biased regardless. We know this when we see their political content and they always skew in a direction. The only time I really saw a presenter hammer anyone of any political affiliation, it was Jerry Paxman, a lifelong Labour voter. He hammered his own side when Ed Miliband was leader of the opposition, and he annihilated the Conservatives at every opportunity. He did not hold back in his disdain for any of them when they were absolute twats. Because the BBC are bitch-made, they are now speaking to Twitter about the designation on the @BBC account to resolve this issue as soon as possible. In a statement, BBC said that the BBC is and has always been independent. We are funded by the British public through the licence fee. Oh, you mean that thing that was brought in with legislation by a government? Interesting. Almost like you are by definition then government funded. We can be pedantic here too, you know. Not just those in my comments. Hi. I still like you. I just wish you weren't like this all the time. It's very disappointing. By the way, the annual license fee is currently £159. This is required by law to watch live TV broadcasts or live streaming in the UK. It is set by the government, but paid for by individual UK households, which means the government has input on it. That's what it means. They set the legislation. By the way, I can get Netflix for less. I don't watch much content these days beyond YouTube, and I even then don't watch much. I have Spotify. I also have Amazon Prime. Why would I want to watch any of the crap on the BBC? The only good show they produced recently was Peaky Blinders, and I decided to forego the BBC entirely and just buy the DVDs. I know, it's a dead medium, but then I don't have to watch it on the BBC's own site. I'm okay with this. The BBC have many different BBC accounts. Depending on the genre, yes, subgenre, blah blah blah. The main one is the only one designated government-funded media. By the way, the BBC aren't the only ones to get hit. You have RT, which is listed as Russia state-affiliated media. You have NPR, government-funded media. Interestingly, it was pointed out by End Wokeness on Twitter that CBC News gets 70% of its funding from the Canadian government, yet it is not listed as a government-funded media. Elon Musk replied to that with, "We need to add more granularity to editorial influence, and it varies greatly." I don't actually think the BBC is as biased as some other government-funded media, but it is silly of the BBC to claim zero influence. Minor government influence in their case would be accurate. I agree with Matthew Marsden, they have huge influence. their reach is far too far. They try to hold themselves and create little watchdogs to prevent themselves from going too far in a direction that is biased in some manner. However, they've always been biased. It's why they are not a credible source in the United Kingdom for news. In the same sense of, I know any of the American ones, CNN, yeah, that one's pretty bad. In fact, that one's horrendous for fake news. Moving on from that, let's go to the realm of music, entertainment, and acting. First of all, Donald Glover, who in an interview with GQ admitted that Tina Fey had actually told him he was an affirmative action hire because the team wasn't diverse enough when doing 30 Rock. He himself admitting that he didn't really feel like he fit in at the time. Now he knows why. This is how you know, even though he's an amazing actor and his music's pretty good, you know he wasn't meant to be there because he wasn't the best person for the job. That time period was renowned for affirmative action, which tokenized many people based on physical traits instead of their talent. Now he, over the years, has developed his talent, but things like affirmative action should never have to exist. I get the time where people came from. I get that the landscape had to be changed a little so we can get to a place where people are no longer having to use things like this to get a leg up. I get it. I guess the reason it tickles me is because that's what they had to do. It's worked out in the end for Donald Glover because he's become something quite successful. I still think his best work was Community myself. 6 seasons and a movie. Where's the fecking movie? The other person I want to talk about is P. Diddy, or Diddy, who recently lost a copyright lawsuit. He, as a consequence, has to pay an ongoing fee to Sting each day for the rest of his life to the tune of $5,000. Which, if P. Diddy lasted another 40 years, would cost him $73 million, or $1.8 million a year. Not bad, considering he's worth $900 million. This isn't going to hurt him too much. Now the reason why is because he used the sampling of one of Sting's tracks without permission back in 1997. The song was the Police's hit, Every Breath You Take. It was used in Diddy's song I'll Be Missing You. Sting originally discussed the subject back in 2018 when speaking with The Breakfast Club. In the footage, radio host Charlemagne the God asked the frontman, so Sting, is it true that Diddy has to pay you $2,000 because he didn't ask permission to sample Every Breath You Take? Sting replied, yep, for the rest of his life. What makes this more interesting is Diddy actually confirmed on his Twitter when Black Millionaires had tweeted, Diddy reportedly pays $2,000 a day to the artist Sting for sampling his hit song with, nope, $5,000 a day, love to my brother, official Sting. Yeah? I guess one of the reasons this gets more attention is because a lot of artists of late have been selling their masters to various labels and peoples and making huge amounts of money in the process. Last year, Sting was listed as the highest earning solo artist because he had sold his entire discography, including his work with the Police, to Universal Music Group for $210 million US, or 168 million pounds in real money. So I guess part of that intrigues me to an extent. I didn't realize that if he'd sold his entire music, catalog, that Diddy would still have to pay him. That's intriguing. It's possible I misunderstand the entire situation. But $5,000 a day, can't complain. You might be able to buy coffee with that in New York. If you're lucky, you might even get a bourbon biscuit too. Let's move on to some general jackassery in the form of a man called Kieran Francis, aged 36, who, to avoid the popo, the pigs, the rozzers, the fuzz, took to rather creative means to do so. On the 15th of July 2021, at the Cheshunt railway station in Hertfordshire, Kieran Francis took a stolen car, which had been stolen from Braintree, Essex on the 11th of June 2021, on the tracks, through a level crossing to get onto the tracks. Now, he was found not guilty of not stealing the car, but he was convicted of 2 charges of endangering life. What's really interesting is he had previously pled guilty to dangerous driving while disqualified, 2 offences of criminal damage, unlawfully driving on the railway tracks, assaulting an emergency worker, and abandoning the car itself. Also, driving with no insurance. But there are more charges. You see, he did plead guilty to supplying sherbet and another substance I've yet to give a novel name to, between January and July of 2021. He was at that time running a confectionery but illegal version of it line in the town of Braintree. Originally what had happened was the police had tried to stop the vehicle in Windmill Lane in Cheshunt, He had tussled with a police officer who tried to stop him driving off. Kieran got in the car, reversed, causing a police officer to roll away, crashed into more cars before driving off towards the town's railway station.
Get out of the car! Out of the car!
He smashed through the closed barrier, turned south down the track, passing waiting passengers. The train at the time when the gates were down, yeah, it was coming down the line. It had to be stopped. That was a expedited cease, you know. When someone says this looks like a scene out of Grand Theft Auto, they're right. 66 trains were cancelled, and there were 488 minutes of train delays and costs of nearly £50,000 to Network Rail. This is what happened when he did this. His counsel had said that he has mental health and learning difficulties. He suffers anxiety and depression and is in constant pain after an accident. I have anxiety and depression as well. I am not remotely tempted to drive on railway tracks unless I suddenly have a flux capacitor I can go back to 1855. For all those charges, he got 10 years. Obviously, the most interesting part itself is the driving on the tracks. Would you like to see that? Because we've got a clip of it. I think it's a very good way of ending the video, watching a little IRL GTA.